help me reach 1,000 subscribers. Please like the video and share your thoughts on the video. Your feedback helps make the contents better. Now let's get to the story.
The fluorescent lights above my hospital bed flickered like dying stars as I heard my mother's voice cut through the sterile air. "Let him go. We won't pay for the surgery." Her words weren't whispered. They were matter-of-fact, like she was declining an extended warranty on a toaster. I was in a coma, but somehow, some part of me registered those words, stored them away in whatever corner of my brain was still fighting to survive. The doctor's hesitant response was drowned out by the sound of a pen scratching paper. My own mother had just signed a do not resuscitate order. Not because I was brain dead, not because there was no hope, but because saving my life would cost too much money. My name is David Peterson, and I'm 32 years old. Well, I was 31 when this happened, but the 3 months I spent recovering aged me in ways that birthdays never could. Before the accident, I was a financial analyst at a mid-sized investment firm in Chicago. Nothing fancy, but I was good at my job, good enough that I built up a decent savings account and a portfolio that would have made my younger self proud. I lived in a modest apartment in Lincoln Park, drove a 7-year-old Honda Accord, and thought I had a pretty good relationship with my parents. Turns out, I didn't know my mother at all. The accident itself was almost comically stupid. I was crossing the street on my way to grab lunch, looking at my phone because apparently I hadn't heard enough public service announcements about distracted walking. A delivery truck ran a red light, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up 72 hours later with a splitting headache, 3 broken ribs, a shattered collarbone, and the knowledge that my mother had tried to let me die to avoid medical bills. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these stories matter. The first face I saw when I opened my eyes wasn't my mother's. It was my older sister, Jennifer. Jen was crying, which immediately told me something was seriously wrong because my sister hadn't cried since our dog died when she was 12. She'd held it together through her divorce, through our grandfather's funeral, through every hardship life had thrown at her. But there she was, tears streaming down her face, holding my hand like I might disappear as she let go. "You're awake," she whispered. "Oh God, David, you're awake." "Water," I croaked. My throat felt like I'd swallowed sandpaper. She practically jumped up to get me some, and that's when I noticed she was alone in the room. "Where's Mom and Dad?" Jen's face did something complicated. "Dad's in the cafeteria." "Mom went home." Even in my foggy state, I could tell there was a story there. But before I could ask, a nurse came in, followed by Dr. Richardson, the surgeon who'd apparently put me back together. They went through the usual battery of tests. Could I feel my toes? What year was it? Who was the president? I passed everything except the part where they asked if I was experiencing any pain. That one got a laugh out of me that turned into a wince. Everything hurt. It was Dad who told me the truth, later that evening when Jen had gone home to shower and change. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days. His eyes were red-rimmed, and his hands shook as he pulled a chair up next to my bed. "Son," he started, then stopped. Started again. "Son, there's something you need to know." And that's when I learned that my mother had signed the DNR, that she'd actually argued with the doctors, insisting that the surgery to repair my internal injuries was too expensive, that she'd told them to make me comfortable and let nature take its course. My father had been in the bathroom when she did it, and by the time he found out, she'd already left the hospital. "I avoided it immediately," Dad said, his voice breaking. "Dr. Richardson operated anyway. He said if they waited another hour, you probably wouldn't have made it. The internal bleeding." He couldn't finish. I didn't need him to. "Where is she now?" I asked. "Home. She says she's not coming back to the hospital. Says it's too hard for her to see you like this." Dad's laugh was bitter. Too hard for her. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't hit you all at once. It seeps in slowly, like water through a crack in the foundation. As I lay there over the next few days, pieces of the puzzle started coming together. Jen visited every day, and she wasn't good at keeping secrets when she was angry. And boy, was she angry. Do you know why she did it? Jen asked on day 4, pacing my hospital room like a caged animal. It wasn't even about the medical bills. Dad's insurance would have covered most of it. It was about the deductible. $20,000, David. She tried to let you die over $20,000. There has to be more to it, I said, but even as I said it, I knew I was making excuses. Oh, there is. Jen stopped pacing and looked at me. Mom's been gambling again. Online poker. Dad didn't know until the hospital called about the bills. She's blown through $60,000 in the last 8 months. The hits just kept coming. My mother had a gambling problem that she'd supposedly beaten 15 years ago. Apparently, beaten was optimistic. Dad's devastated. Jen continued. He's been covering her debts without telling anyone. He took out a second mortgage on the house last year. That's why they suddenly cared about $20,000. They're broke, David. And instead of coming clean, instead of asking for help, she decided it would be easier to just let you go. I didn't say anything. What could I say? Part of me wanted to believe there was some explanation, some missing piece that would make it all make sense. But deep down, I knew the truth. My mother had looked at a spreadsheet of her life and decided I was a liability she couldn't afford. The anger came later. In the middle of the night, when the pain medication wore off and I was alone with my thoughts. It started as a small spark in my chest and grew into a wildfire. She hadn't even visited. Not once. She'd signed a paper to let me die and then went home to play poker on her iPad. The woman who'd raised me, who'd packed my lunches and attended my soccer games and cried at my college graduation, had decided I wasn't worth $20,000. But here's the thing about being a financial analyst. You learn to think strategically. You learn that emotion is the enemy of good decision-making. And as I lay there in that hospital bed, I started to think very strategically about my mother's future. By the time I was discharged 2 weeks later, I had a plan. It wasn't a nice plan. It wasn't a forgiving plan. But it was a thorough plan, and it would hit her where it hurt most. Right in the wallet she valued more than her own son's life. Dad picked me up from the hospital. Mom still hadn't visited, hadn't even called. She'd sent one text message. Glad you're okay. Need some space right now. That text message cost her everything, though she didn't know it yet. I moved into Jen's spare bedroom to recover. My apartment had stairs, and I wasn't ready for that yet. Plus, Jen had made it clear that she wanted me close, like she was afraid I might disappear if she wasn't watching. Dad visited every day, looking more and more like a ghost of himself. He'd filed for separation. He told me quietly one afternoon, the divorce papers would be coming soon. I can't forgive this, he said simply. I've forgiven a lot over the years. The gambling the first time, the secret credit cards, the lies. But this, trying to let our son die, there's no coming back from that. I nodded. I understood completely. But I also knew that divorce would take time, and Dad was too kind, too worn down to really make her pay for what she'd done. That's where I came in. The first thing I did was make some calls. Remember how I said I was good at my job? Well, I was good enough that I'd made connections. Friends in banking, in real estate, in credit services. I'd spent years building a network, and now it was time to use it. My mother, it turned out, had been very busy while I was unconscious. She'd taken out 3 payday loans using Dad's information. She'd maxed out 2 credit cards that Dad didn't know about. And she'd taken a cash advance on their home equity line of credit. The one thing Dad had left that wasn't underwater. All of that information came to me through perfectly legal channels. Dad had given me power of attorney for his financial affairs while he dealt with the emotional fallout. Mom didn't know that. She thought she was still playing her little games in secret. I started with the poker sites. There are ways to flag accounts for problem gambling, to get them shut down, to make it very difficult for someone to access online gambling platforms. I knew people who knew people, and suddenly, my mother found herself locked out of every poker site she'd been using. Her accounts were frozen pending investigation into unusual activity patterns. Then I went after the payday loans. These places are predatory by nature, but they really don't like it when someone takes out loans using false information. I happened to have documentation showing that my mother had forged my father's signature on at least 2 of the loan applications. Anonymous tips to their fraud departments are wonderfully effective. The credit cards were trickier, but not impossible. My mother had been using Dad's business credit for personal expenses, which violated the terms of service. More anonymous tips, more investigations launched. The credit card companies didn't freeze the accounts immediately, but they did start asking questions. Lots of questions. Do you know what else I learned during all this? My mother had been telling her sister, my Aunt Carol, that I was the one with the gambling problem, that I'd racked up massive debts and was trying to blame her, that the accident had been my fault because I was distracted from stress about money I owed to loan sharks. She created this entire narrative where she was a victim, dealing with a troubled son and an unsupportive husband. When Jen found out about that little detail, she made a group chat with all our relatives and posted the hospital records. Every single page of documentation about the DNR, the surgery, the recovery. She included screenshots of Mom's online poker accounts, helpfully provided by a friend who worked in tech and owed me a favor. She even included photos of Mom's texts from the day of my surgery, where she was complaining about the cost of keeping me alive to her poker buddy. The family chat exploded. Absolutely exploded. Our family had always been close. Big Sunday dinners, holiday gatherings, the whole Norman Rockwell thing. Everyone had always thought my mother was just quirky, maybe a little high-strung, but fundamentally good-hearted. Learning that she tried to let her son die to save money, that shattered about 50 years of family dynamics in one afternoon. Aunt Carol stopped speaking to her. Uncle Mike, Dad's brother, called her from 3 states away just to tell her she was dead to him. Cousins I hadn't talked to in years were reaching out to me, apologizing for not seeing the signs, offering support. My mother's entire social network collapsed in about 6 hours. But I wasn't done, not even close. The thing about financial revenge is that timing is everything. Mom had managed to isolate herself socially, but she still had access to Dad's money. The house was in both their names. The bank accounts were joint, and Dad was too devastated to think clearly about protecting his assets. That's where I came in. I sat Dad down and walked him through everything. Every loan, every debt, every forgery. I showed him how much money Mom had actually gone through. It wasn't $60,000. It was closer to $120,000. She'd been very, very busy. We need to protect you, I told him. If we don't act now, her debts are going to sink you too. Dad had always been a peaceful guy, the kind who avoided conflict at all costs. But something in him had hardened since the hospital. He nodded slowly. What do I need to do? We filed an emergency motion to freeze all joint assets pending the divorce. We documented every single fraudulent loan and credit card transaction. We gathered evidence of her gambling addiction, and there was a lot of it. The woman had been live streaming her poker games on a private Discord server, complete with running commentary about how she was going to win big and pay everything back before Dad noticed. Those streams were a goldmine. In one of them, she literally talked about the DNR. If something happens to David, that's one less expense to worry about, she told her online poker friends. The universe works mysterious ways, right? I made sure the divorce attorney got copies of everything. All of it. Every stream, every text, every piece of evidence that showed exactly who my mother really was. The court hearing for the emergency asset freeze was 3 weeks after I got out of hospital. I was still using a cane, still had visible bruises, still looked like I'd been hit by a truck, which, to be fair, I had been. The judge took one look at me, then at the evidence, then at my mother, and his face went through about 12 different expressions. "Mrs. Peterson," he said slowly, "did you really sign a do not resuscitate order for your son to avoid medical expenses while you had over $40,000 in active online gambling accounts?" My mother, to her credit, tried to lie. "Those accounts were owed, Your Honor. I had a problem years ago, but these accounts show activity from yesterday." The judge interrupted. He was not amused. "You were playing online poker yesterday while your son was in this courtroom fighting to protect his father's assets from your debts." The emergency freeze was granted immediately. Every joint account was locked down. The house sale was put on hold until the divorce could be finalized and assets properly divided. Mom was ordered to produce documentation of every debt, every loan, every credit card. She walked out of that courtroom looking like she'd been slapped. But here's where it gets really interesting. Remember those payday loan companies I tipped off about the fraud? They'd been doing their homework. 3 days after the court hearing, my mother was served with papers for 4 separate lawsuits. The payday loan companies were suing her for fraud. The credit card companies had launched their own investigations and frozen her accounts. Her credit score, which had somehow still been in the high 600s despite everything, dropped to 480 in a week. She called me. First time I'd heard from her since the accident, and it was because she needed something. The call went to voicemail. I listened to it once. "David, honey, I know things have been difficult, but I need your help. These companies are saying I committed fraud, but it's all a misunderstanding. Your father won't talk to me, and Jennifer won't return my calls. I'm your mother. You have to help me." I deleted the voicemail without responding. The lawsuits moved forward. Mom tried to hire a lawyer. But here's the thing about lawyers. They won't be paid. And Mom didn't have any money. All the joint accounts were frozen. Her personal accounts were empty because she gambled it all away, and no one in the family was willing to help her. She tried to represent herself in court, which went about as well as you'd expect. The payday loan companies won judgments against her for the full amounts plus fees and interest. The credit card companies settled for slightly less, but still got their pound of flesh. By the time it was all over, my mother had court-ordered debts totaling just over $200,000. But wait, there's more. Remember that house? The one she and Dad had lived in for 25 years? The one they'd raised me and Jen in? With the divorce finalized and the court's ruling that Mom was responsible for fraudulent debts, Dad got the house. All of it. Mom got nothing except the privilege of being legally responsible for 6 figures worth of debt she couldn't pay. She had to file for bankruptcy. Chapter 7, Complete Liquidation. She lost everything. Her car, her jewelry, the designer handbag she bought during her online shopping sprees. Everything. She moved into a studio apartment in a bad part of town and got a job as a cashier at a discount grocery store. And me? I recovered. Slowly, painfully, but I recovered. I went back to work after 3 months. Got a promotion 6 months after that. Dad sold the house. Too many bad memories, and bought a nice condo downtown. He started dating again, which was weird to see, but also kind of nice. Jen said he smiled more now than he had in years. I never spoke to my mother again. She tried a few times. Emails, letters, even showing up at my new apartment once. But I had nothing to say to her. What do you say to someone who decided your life was worth less than $20,000? What conversation could we possibly have that would make that okay? The last I heard, she was working 2 jobs to try to pay down her bankruptcy debts. She'd be doing that for the next decade at least. She'd lost her home, her family, her social standing, everything that mattered to her. And it all started because she signed a piece of paper saying I wasn't worth saving. Here's what I learned from all of this. Sometimes revenge isn't about yelling or confrontation or dramatic scenes. Sometimes it's about looking at the situation clearly, identifying the pressure points, and applying force precisely where it will do the most damage. My mother valued money more than she valued me, so I took her money. All of it. Every penny she had, every penny she could borrow, every penny she thought she'd hidden away. Did I feel guilty? Sometimes, late at night, a small part of me wondered if I'd gone too far. But then I'd remember waking up in that hospital bed, remember learning that she'd signed the DNR, remember the voicemail where she'd only called because she needed something from me, and the guilt would disappear. She made her choice when she picked up that pen in the hospital. I just made sure she had to live with the consequences. Some people might call that cruel. I call it fair. She wanted to save money by letting me die. Instead, her decision to value cash over a child cost her absolutely everything. The funny thing is, if she'd just been honest in the start, if she'd admitted she had a problem and asked for help, none of this would have happened. Dad would have figured something out. I would have helped. The family would have rallied around her. But she chose secrets and lies and a do not resuscitate order over trust and honesty. So yeah, she's bankrupt now, working minimum wage jobs in her 60s, living in a studio apartment, eating ramen for dinner, and wearing secondhand clothes. Everything she was so desperate to hold on to by letting me die, gone, completely gone. And every time she counts her tips or checks her bank balance or pays another installment on her court-ordered debts, I hope she remembers that it all started with a signature on a form that said her son's life wasn't worth the cost of saving it. I'm doing fine now, in case you're wondering. Better than fine, actually. I got engaged last month to an amazing woman who actually values human life over money. Wild concept, I know. Dad's walking me down the aisle. Jen's my best man, because traditions are overrated, and she's the one who had my back when it mattered. Mom didn't get an invitation. She'll probably find out about it on social media, from the pictures our relatives post. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm okay with all of it, because at the end of the day, I'm alive in spite of her, not because of her. I'm successful, I'm loved. I'm building a life with people who actually give a damn whether I live or die. She's got nothing but debt and regret. Some people say living well is the best revenge. They're wrong. Living well while the person who betrayed you loses everything they held dear, that's the best revenge. And I'm living very, very well. My name is David Peterson. I'm 32 years old, and I'm the son who survived because my father loved me more than my mother valued money. This is my story, and if my mother ever hears it, I hope she chokes on every word. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories reach. Are you from the U.S., the Philippines, Canada? Maybe you're right here in New York like me. Wherever you are, your support means everything. I've noticed so many of you from the Philippines and Canada have been incredibly supportive in the comments. You guys really understand that family isn't just about blood, it's about loyalty. And to my viewers here in the U.S. and New York, thank you for proving that stories like mine deserve to be heard. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and share this video with someone who needs to hear that standing up for yourself isn't wrong. It's necessary. Sometimes the best way to heal is to make sure the people who hurt you can't hurt anyone else the same way. Let me know in the comments what you would have done in my situation. I'll be reading every single one. Thanks for being here. Until next time,